why aren't we getting there? Why aren't we doing the thing? What is the difference between me and the person who is showing up?
Number one biggest struggle I see is shame. And that was me. I was in 15 years of talk therapy. I can actualize my emotions. I'm quite aware of all the fucked up shit happening on the inside. What do I do about it?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ariel Campbell, and I help people set themselves free to be the version of who they want to be, to fully love themselves and step into that. And I use different tools like functional neurology and emotional navigation techniques to help them get to that point to fast track their life.
Hey, I'm Taylor Davis. Welcome to Wildly Satisfied. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. I am so excited for this episode in the series. Now, I know that in this season, we're talking a lot about burnout, around stress, around being a feminine leader, and I'm so excited. It's funny because I'm not even going to really introduce you. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. And I'm not even going to really introduce this episode and this mini series that we have because I have experienced her, but I can't describe her. So in a minute, we're going to dive into who this lovely, amazing woman is, Ariel, and a little bit about functional neurology. And that's all I'm going to say. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. We will dive into it and how it really helps you fast track to the next level. But first, we're going to take a deep breath and we're going to just come into our bodies for this experience and just breathe in together.
So let's all just take a breath and just notice where you are listening to this, where you are in your life in this moment, and just welcome yourself to this present moment. Take a breath in, breath out. Move your body if your body needs to move. Take another breath in. Thanking yourself for showing up today. And last one, take a deep breath in, filled with whatever intention you want to bring to this moment with you. And let it go. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being who you are in this life. It's so powerful to be here with you.
Yes. I'm so excited. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. I love this. So before we dive into so many questions and what the series is about, I would love for you to introduce yourself and what you do, and whatever comes out and feels natural is good.
Yeah, who knows? I'm ready for it.
Okay.
So my name is Ariel, and I've been doing body work for a little over 12 years. And in that process, I really found out that the body wasn't healing. Like, people kept coming back to me over and over again and were not actually getting to the point that they were trying to get to. And so I spent many years studying many different kinds of modalities, and the thing that really supported the process that I now help people through is functional neurology, which, when you break down what functional neurology is, it is how neurology functions in the body. Like, we can go all heady and all science about it. None of that really matters. What matters is how your body is perceiving information. Does the body feel safe in its surrounding? Does the emotions feel safe in the body? And how do we get to that point? So I associate it with like GPS navigation. Like, if we're going to get from point A to point B, what are we going to do? We're going to look and we're going to see, what's the fastest way for me to get there? Is there any stalled cars? Is there any construction? Is there any traffic? Is there any detours I need to take to get me from point A to point B? Most people think that point B is a nebulous thing they're never going to achieve. But actually, it's going to inevitably happen. It's up to you how quick you get there. Sometimes construction's there and you need to hire emotional therapist. You need to hire somatic therapist. You need to hire talk therapist. You need to hire people to do the construction work on your road to make sure that your road is a way that you can get from point A to point B. Or you'll notice that, like, oh, this stalled car is a trauma that I need to go back and look at. And it's really the work of functional neurology is getting you from point A to point B while moving all that stuff out of the way.
I love that. I have a friend who is really into human design, and I know we talk a little bit about that too. Well, we don't need to go into that right now, but she always says your body is like a self-driving Tesla, and it's like, well, you're the passenger and you're letting it drive you forward. So I love the analogy that you have right there of like, but sometimes there's construction in the way. Sometimes there's something on the road that's slowing you down. And so I love this. I would love for you to, I know that, functional neurology can be very science and heady. What do you normally see when people come to see you? Like, what are they coming to you for? What are some of the things that you see that they struggle maybe most with?
Number one, most biggest struggle I see, if we want to call it a struggle, is shame. They feel bad, they feel wrong, they feel broken, they feel not enough, they feel too much. That is the basis of a lot of people's issues. And people come to me after they've tried talk therapy, they've tried EMDR, they've tried psychedelics, they've tried Reiki, they've tried all these different avenues, and still they're struggling with this stuff in their body, whether it be anxiety or depression or gut dysbiosis or something very physical, or it's showing up in their environmental reality where it's like they're stuck in a job that they hate or a relationship that they don't feel love in, or they're in a scarcity mindset around money, or they have all these blocks. So I work with people who are on the next level, people who've done a lot of work, who they're like, I know I have a block and I can't figure out how to find it, and I'm ready to find it, and I've heard that you can do that.
They're like, I've checked all the boxes, I've done all the things.
Yeah,
Like,
why the fuck do I still feel like this?
yes, oh my God, I resonate with that so much.
And that was me. I was in 15 years of talk therapy, and I'd been doing all of this work, and I was still anxious, I was still depressed, I still felt like shit, my body didn't feel good, and I'm like, I can actualize my emotions. I'm quite aware of all the fucked up shit happening on the inside. What do I do about it?
Yeah.
And I figured out what to do about it. And I feel so free and safe in my body that it is my passion, my joy, my purpose, to one of my purposes, not all of them, but to help people feel that same thing, because I know what it feels like to be completely disembodied. I know what it feels like to not be present in my body. I know what it feels like to run to substances, run to people, run outside of myself to find that safety and freedom that I was so desiring inside of myself that wasn't there.
Do you feel like, because you said the challenge, obviously there's so many on that list of, I said usually say challenges versus like struggles,
Yeah.
because I feel like we tend to idolize struggle a lot, especially in American society and just the world in general, versus like it doesn't have to be as hard as we're making
Yes.
it. And do you feel like there's, shame is obviously a very underlying thing, but do you feel like that is the most underlying thing for all of the struggles that you're seeing, or the challenges that you're seeing, or are there other things that are coming up that are more prevalent, like in men versus women or anything like that?
It's a really interesting question. And yes, that is the basis of all of it. I really feel it can show up in different ways, like not feeling worthy is not enough, right? And anything that's bad, wrong, broken, not enough, or too much is shame. And so that 5 thing, when we really look at what shame is, it's like most things will fit into that category. It can look like my mom didn't give me the love I needed when I was a child, which is I'm not enough to receive my mother's love. It can look like my boyfriend broke up with me, I was not pretty enough for him, right? It can always look in these ways that there's different examples, but it all comes down in general to a shame dynamic. Our whole construct of this reality, I think, is really based on shame, because if you're in shame, you can be controlled, and in controlled spaces, we are not embodied and empowered in ourselves.
Yeah, and we live so much in that society of shame as a basis for how we are. And for us, that I have conversations with my friends about this, is we look at even how, and we don't have to go super deep into like America and everything, because this shame happens everywhere. It's literally part of such a human experience, right? But even if you look at America specifically, we talk about how, we were pretty much built from Puritans. I'm like, there's a giant cult that made America. There's lots of religious shame there and things like that. Not to hate on religions, but there's a lot of shame that can come from that. And so of course it's going to come up. And just honestly, the reason why a lot of these conversations that I like to have on the platform is because it's normalizing a different way of life, so that the shame is released and we don't have to continue to perpetuate shame. Because if you talk about it and you move through it, you're able to move on to what's next in your life and accept parts of yourself that you've never really seen before. So for shame being the underlying part of this, do you feel like that is one of the biggest reasons why people self-sabotage?
Yes.
Yeah.
The antidote to shame is honor. So how can you honor yourself? How can you honor the part of you that doesn't feel enough? And I will say that a lot of people that I've experienced, that their nervous system doesn't even know what it would feel like to feel enough, or to feel worthy, or to feel loved. And so when they get close to a space that can happen, they will self-sabotage, because there's 2 different beliefs fighting each other. There's the belief that I'm enough, There's a belief that I'm not enough. And then someone comes in and like, hey, I like you, I think you're enough. The belief that I'm not enough is gonna step online and push that person away, because that belief is fighting harder at that moment. But then you go back to the struggle, you're like, why do I keep doing this thing that I don't enjoy doing? Like, I don't feel good when I do this. And it's this fight back and forth between those two sides.
Oh, okay. So I feel like when you said that, I remember, like, let's just say love, for example, right? I remember having this feeling around, I think I'm an amazing person. Like, I'm a good person. I do good things. I have amazing friends. They're like, oh my God, you're one of my best friends. You get that feedback, right? And there comes a point sometimes when I'm dating someone, or when I'm like, even just a friend, they're like, oh yeah, you're amazing. And I'm like, oh, you like me? I'm like, what? Why do you like me? And then I'm like, who is that?
Yeah, exactly. That's the next question.
Because
who said that?
Exactly. Or even if they didn't say it, who put that energy into you? Because sometimes it's not like your mom looked at you and was like, you're not worthy.
No,
like, it's not
like who said that in your head?
Yeah, who said it in your head? Because, and it'll come up and you're like, whoa, that's definitely not me. So that's such an interesting, like, and even I can see that, how that shows up in being a feminine leader, being in business, because we have so many desires of where we want our life to be. Right? It's like, why aren't we getting there? Why aren't we doing the thing? What is the difference between me and the person who is showing up bigger online, or whatever it is that our desire is, to be able to speak on stages or write the book, or whatever it is that we are somehow self-sabotaging to keep ourselves small. And so it's interesting that that shows up in that way. When you work with self-sabotage, like, what does that look like? What do you see most often?
I want to touch on the thing you said right before that.
Yeah.
That's the people that have the things that we want. I think one of the biggest secrets is they finally went within and stopped giving a fuck what anyone thinks on the outside of them. Because for us to make changes and to be in our purpose, we're gonna go on the edge of what people think is comfortable. And on that edge is where we actually, like, people see us and they're like, oh, you're doing your thing. And you're like, yeah, I am. We're doing the damn thing. It's happening. And I think it's that. It's like finally, like, truly not giving a fuck. Like, getting to the point that you're just like, I'm going to completely show up in exactly who I am and how I am. And that is worthy and enough in itself.
Can we dive a little bit deeper into that? Actually, forget the question I just asked, because I can't remember. I want to go into this.
Sorry.
No. This was great, because, like, for me, for example, and a lot of people that I work with and friends that I know, they're like, yeah, I don't really care what people think. Like, I say that all the time. I'm like, I don't care what people think. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I have great boundaries. And yet there's always, like, I'm not speaking on stages, like, at the level of what I see, or writing that book or whatever it is. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really care what people think. And
may I ask you a question?
Yes.
What part of you still cares what people think?
The first thing that came up was, if I'm seen on a bigger level, I'm not safe, which is something that I've worked with a lot. I know it's still there though, 1000%. So it's not like, it's like, oh, I'm not safe to be.
What part of you is not safe?
Do you mean physical part, or like anything?
Anything.
I think the inner little girl.
How old is she?
7.
Awesome. So most people, when we get to this point, it's like, and we'll do that in our bonus session.
Oh yeah, we're gonna be doing a bonus session, you guys, which when you subscribe, you can get access to the, like, private content, where it's gonna be my session. You get to see exactly what she does in real time. I'm so excited for this.
It's gonna be so cool.
It's gonna be so cool.
And we'll do it on that,
yeah,
specifically.
Okay, cool.
But what most people do is they'll, I need to let something go. It's a full moon. I need to write this thing and burn it and get rid of it.
Let's purge in an ayahuasca ceremony.
The fuck are we doing? Like, we're already disintegrated. There's so many pieces of us that are not here. So instead of trying to burn it away, let it die, get rid of it, it's actually like, how do we love it? So the 7-year-old version of you, and that's what we'll do in the session, is really figure out what that 7-year-old version of you needs, and then do some neurological reprogramming around it. And then figure out how to navigate your nervous system from that new place. So it's loving it. Like, how do I need to love the 7-year-old self? And we can call that, like, inner child work or whatever. And it's not just like, let's write them a letter. That's awesome. You can do that and see what comes up. And, like, if you were to write to that version of you, it's deeper than that though. There's a point in time when you were 7 that belief got embedded in you. And so it's like, where did that come from? And is it mine? Is it somebody else's, and do I like it? And if I don't like it, I get to change it. It doesn't have to be that serious, right?
Yeah.
Like we think healing is like this thing when healing, it's not about healing. It's about finding connection. It's about being present. It's about being in our body. It's about finding safety.
Which is the truest sense of healing versus someone going into a quote unquote healing journey for like 4 years of their life where they're constantly ripping themselves open.
Yeah.
Diving into the trauma. And I know that like where we met was at the Condor Approach, which is a client of mine and beautiful friends who have this
shameless plug. If you do not know about the Condor Approach,
yes,
Google it right now.
It
will change your life.
And I actually have the people who, they were clients of mine, so it's Ta and Cole Whitty, and they will both be in this season as well. So if you haven't listened to their episode, go listen to it.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
Ugh.
Well, and on top of that, like when we were there, somebody was bringing up like, I know you're always healing. And I've talked about this so much with the people, with my clients, because when you're in the coaching world, when you're in the health world, just the world in general, it's really cool to be on your healing journey. Even though you don't say it's cool, there's this like thing that started happening with people where everyone's doing shadow work and everyone's ripping themselves open, and I'm constantly in these death and rebirth cycles, and they're all very beautiful. And there comes a point where it's like, actually, you're not healing all the time. Yes, you're changing all the time, but if you're healing all the time, you're actually probably ripping yourself open, the wound over and over and over and over again. So I love what you said about like, can we just love it instead of being like, let's just pick the scab over and over, and why am I like this, you know?
People call me a healer. I'm not a healer, I'm a thriver, and healing's just a byproduct. Because if we say that we're healing, we're never going to make it to thriving. We cannot vibrate at the frequency of thriving if we're healing. Does that make sense?
Say that again. Let's do it.
We cannot ever truly thrive and be at the frequency of thriving if we're still in the frequency of healing. Just like you can't find something that's been lost. That's not the same frequency. The problem and the solution are not the same.
Yeah.
That's why like sometimes you'll like forget something like, oh, let me stop thinking about it and it'll come back, because that's the only way that it can, is if you're not like, oh, I'm not thinking about something. It's like, oh, I'll be there when it needs to be there. There's all these dichotomies in energy that we need to be aware of, because we are physical, spiritual, mental, emotional beings having a human experience. And so there's multiple different layers of us that are happening all at the same time. It's like, if I want to be at point B, which is thriving, which is presentness, which is connection, which is feeling love and freedom in my body, what will get me to that point? And then you'll hit a roadblock, you'll hit self-sabotage, you'll hit burnout, you'll hit all these things. And then when you get to that point, instead of shaming yourself, saying, oh, I'm not doing enough, I need to do more healing work, I need to, whatever.
It's gonna be so hard.
Yes. Our relationship as a human species to suffering is really fascinating, because suffering is inevitable. Suffering does not mean you're not on the right track. Suffering is just suffering. And we as humans put a good and bad connotation that like, I'm not in my purpose or I'm not in my alignment if I'm suffering. And it's like, no, that's just, what if that's the path of least resistance? And what if it's just suffering? And actually some of the most beautiful shit comes from the suffering. Like so many parts of my experience, I am who I am today because of the suffering. And I'm so fucking grateful for every piece of that, truly, like in the deepest form. It took me years to be able to be in this space, but like, damn, this whole thing is so beautifully guided by divine love. That's all fucking perfect, even when it doesn't feel like it is.
Well, I think too, we talked about this a little bit before we filmed, but I think the problem, so I never go into like, we need to have pain all the time to be like, that's not how I operate. I say all the time, I had a moment where I actually chose differently. I went through, I ripped myself open after years of ripping myself open. And I said, I'm done learning from pain. I only want to learn from pleasure now. And I love that, because things are still going to come up. I'm in a very funky part in my life right now. It doesn't mean that everything's glorious, and there's never tiny moments of like, oh yeah, okay, maybe I'm suffering a little bit, but there's a lesson here. Versus, I think the problem is when people glorify suffering to the point where like the pendulum has swung so far over, where it's like constant suffering is idolized, where it's, you're not learning anything, you're literally just suffering, and you're not
for the name of suffering.
For the name of suffering. And it's like, oh my God, my life is so hard. And I'm like, yeah, but like, where are you going to use that for something, or are you going to let that bury you? Like there's a very different, just like when you're like way too much on the other side of the pendulum where you're like, life is actually amazing, but you're actually like shoving everything down and not looking at where responsibility needs to be taken, or where you need to look at your life and be like, actually, it's not what you think it is. And you know, maybe there's some harm that's happening there. So,
and if you take an actual look at the reality in which you exist in, the things, they are giving you all the lessons that you need. Like if, like I have a friend who is dating, and we're talking about like showing up in vulnerability, and she's like, damn, I don't like dating. I feel so vulnerable. And I'm like, oh, what is this teaching you, right? That you can show up as your full self. Like there's so many lessons. When we see the things that make us feel icky, it's actually the mirror to be able to face the ickiness, instead of running from it or being like, oh, I don't know if I can do that.
I feel like you're calling me out so much in these episodes. Like at first you said that one. I was like, oh, I feel that, because with dating, I'm really good at being alone, and I've mastered the art of detachment when it comes to relationships, all those things. And right now I'm getting back into dating again because I'm like, I feel more expansive, more myself, all the things. And at the same time, I'm like, oh my God, there's so much like effort that goes into this. There's that resistance. And then earlier you said, did we take something on that wasn't ours? And something that came up recently was, it's this belief that I'm like, oh, that's not mine. Like I immediately knew it wasn't, where it's like, oh, I'm going to lose everything. There's literally nothing that has ever happened to me specifically where that was a thought, but it was my father's during 2008, when my life did shift because of it, like everything with, you know, the housing market and recession and stuff. So it's interesting to look at what are your beliefs? What are the ones that you absorbed where you're like, this has never happened to me? And then where, like you were talking about with the dating, it's like, where are you in some ways self-sabotaging that as well? And just to totally absorb, like, it's insane.
I didn't even realize. So I go through expansive experiences like all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
It's like the norm.
It just doesn't stop.
No.
And I love it. But it's a lot. And I was driving in my car, and because I've done such a good job of like learning my nervous system and reading my nervous system, driving my car, my windows down, I'm singing super loud. I passed this car of like young boys driving, and I felt my nervous system shut down. I was like, oh, what was that? And then I looked into it, and I realized that there was a belief inside of me that women are stupid, that being a girl is dumb. And I'm like, where did that come from? That is not mine. I'm a girl. Like, I'm not dumb. Where did that come from?
And you can feel that it doesn't feel like yours.
It was my brother's. And like, he embedded that into me as a kid.
Yeah.
And I was still living with that. Oh.
Yeah.
And after that, and healing that and processing that and bringing that part of me in that was like, I can't be a girl because that's dumb. Like, I've noticed all these ways that I show up more in my feminine, in my business, in my life, that it's actually one of my superpowers to be in my feminine and be woman and show up in that way. I have less burnout. I have less self-sabotage in that way. It's so fascinating when we find these beliefs that aren't even ours, that we've been functioning from for a very long time, and we have to slow down and breathe and get to know our nervous system. And how we do that is in relationship with other people. So we can know ourselves by ourselves. But I get around somebody else and, ooh, you bring up so many things. I'm nervous, I'm excited, what do I do with my hands? Like the whole thing comes online, and then that's where I get to learn myself better, because you're actually just a mirror of me and I'm a mirror of you.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what is that bringing up in my nervous system? Oh, juicy.
I like that perspective, because there's also the perspective of, oh my God, I'm triggered. So there's like this negative connotation to it. So back to the conversation of like, everything is either good or bad. But I like how you're like, oh, okay, interesting experience. There's a little bit of detachment. Like, you've removed yourself, like a bird's eye view, looking at it and be like, juicy, what do I get to play with there? What do I get to like, right? And sometimes it's a challenge, but you get to just look at it and be like, ooh, okay. Versus like, oh, I just got triggered again, and then going into like a loop.
We've been taught to not express what we're feeling.
Yeah.
And I was in this dynamic with this man the other day, and just guy friend is over at my house, and my body was going through a process, and I was like processing some vulnerable stuff. And then all of a sudden I felt very raw and vulnerable, and I just wanted to run. And so I said that out loud. I'm like, oh, I want to run. And he's like, this is your house. I can leave. You can stay here.
Oh my God.
And I was like, thanks for that, but that's not even what I need. Like, I just need to say it out loud. And then I started being like, why am I feeling this way? And I'm like, oh, it's because I've never been this vulnerable. Let someone in on this process that I'm experiencing right now. I've never shared this part of me before, and I'm scared you're gonna hurt me. And so he was able to reassure that part of me. And if we could be that honest in dating, like, hey, I really want to kiss you, but I'm nervous and I don't want to come on too strong. Like, why can't we say that? Why can't we be so honest and real with one another? Like, oh, I'm new to this. Like, even before we did this podcast, I was like, I haven't done this before in video form. And so here we go. I'm just going to play with it. And that was me welcoming that part of me, welcoming my nervous system to be like, hey, it's okay to not be great at this. It's okay to do something that you've never done before.
Just take a deep breath.
Yeah. And we have permission to give each other that.
Yeah. And I think even something I've practiced on dates too is I will point blank to say to someone, because I'm like, hey, I'm a slow burn person. Like, I don't like people touching me right away.
Slow burn.
I'm such a slow burn. I do it in like my marketing, my business, everything. But I love the slow burn. I love you building up and being like, okay, versus like this idea of dating where the person like comes up and touches you and all these things. And it's like, why are you, like, I don't know you. You're a literal stranger that I'm starting to date.
Do you remember in like 2009 to like 2013 when you'd be at a club and a dude would literally come and put his penis on your back?
Oh my God.
Do you remember that?
I was way too young for that.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, it was a normal thing in society that like you would like literally be sexually assaulted.
Yes.
And we would be like, oh, he's cute, let's dance. Like, what is that mentality that was then? I don't even know if it still happens because I don't party or go to the club, but
it does. Okay, so I remember when I was in college, which was not long after what you're describing. It was like 2013, and I remember being in bars and just dancing with my girlfriends and coming up and guys just basically like dry humping.
Yes.
And so can we just normalize this conversation of like, hey, our nervous systems need something different. I can just say, hey, I don't like that, or hey, I want this instead, or this is what I'm feeling right now, or whatever it is, because that's how we're able to move through and normalize something else. And then also go, okay, well, what do I need to be able to shift into a new way of being?
Well, even with the men, like I've had many conversations with guy friends of mine who are like, that was wild back then. What were we doing?
What were we doing?
Yeah, like, that's not how I want to approach a woman. Yeah. You know, so it was like a whole societal normalization of different aspects of self that just really fascinating. I don't know how we got on that rabbit. We can bring it back.
No, it's good because, well, it just makes you think about like there were so many things that were normalized. And I always say to people, because you look back in like the 1800s and like women were still being sold and like all these things. And people are like, well, that's just how it was back then. I go, yeah, it was never okay. It was just normalized. And so if we're having a conversation about like, hey, we need to go into, what do we need to stop self-sabotaging? What do we need to stop doing that we can actually invite something new in and normalize a new way of life? It's like, cool, looking at what our habits are and what we're doing that's actually keeping us in an old way of being. Mm-hmm. Let's just bring it full circle. Mm-hmm. It's keeping us in an old way of being. We're evolving because we're human beings and we're meant to evolve. If not, you probably shouldn't be listening to this media company. Like, this is the whole point of this, is to see different models and different ways of life where we don't want that anymore because it was unnecessary suffering. It was unnecessary. No one was happy about that except maybe the creeps. But even then, I'm sure that they had something else going on so that they weren't even aware of. Yeah. So I love that like in this episode, we really got to talk about what you saw with functional neurology and what you see with like how we self-sabotage and shame being an underlying layer. And so in the next episode, what I really want, I'm excited for everybody to listen to, is we're going to get into the specifics of like how it shows up in the body, of how it keeps us small, and what we can actually like physically do and mentally and emotionally do to shift into the next version of ourselves. Because she's so good about like there's a fast track. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say fast track into like going into your next level. And I really want to be able to dive into the like body-based side of things, because when I first experienced you, you were like, oh yeah, well, it's based on a different hemisphere in your brain and the organs in your body. And I'm like, what? So I'm really excited to get into the next part where we actually go into specifics about what it looks like in the body, what functional neurology looks like in terms of how we can move on to our next level. And it's not just like, hey, these are great ideas, but we're going to get into specifics of what that looks like to work with you.
I'm so excited.
I'm really excited too. So you guys will have to catch the next episode and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this Wildly Satisfied production. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love it if you would share it with someone that you love, leave a review, or come tag us on social media at Wildly Satisfied.